Hi, Hadley and Eliza. Boy, I am missing you guys again. I'm so glad I could see you last Saturday for my birthday for a few minutes. But anyways, this is the best I can do. I just can't wait till you can come over and spend the night, or 2 nights maybe. So, we are reading the Hoboken Chicken Emergency. Why do I keep saying conspiracy? And where we are is Henrietta just ran away when she met that dog, remember? And she's up a tree, and the firemen have come to try to get her down, but they think she's a polar bear. So, let's start there today. It isn't as though the polar bear was on fire, Arthur heard one fireman say in a microphone. Over the radio speaker in a police car, Arthur heard a voice. Has there been a complaint that the polar bear is breaking any laws? It isn't a polar bear, it's a chicken, and she's mine, Arthur shouted, and grabbed the biggest policeman around by the sleeve. The big policeman spoke into the microphone. Chief, there's a kid here. Says it isn't a polar bear. Says it's a chicken and it belongs to him. Cluck, Henrietta said. It clucks, said the big policeman into the microphone. It took a long time to convince the firemen and policemen that Henrietta was a chicken and not a polar bear. The clucking finally convinced most of them, although there were some arguments among them at what kind of noise polar bears make. After a while, the firemen put a long ladder up against the tree. Arthur shouted, "Hup!" and Henrietta hopped onto the top rung of the ladder. "Hup!" Arthur shouted again, and she jumped down to the next rung. "Hup, hup, hup, hup!" And Henrietta hopped down the ladder one rung at a time. There was a pretty big crowd by this time, and a man from the newspaper was taking pictures. There were a lot of kids Arthur knew in the crowd. He wished there was a slide nearby. When Henrietta hopped off the last rung, the crowd applauded. Arthur thanked the fire department, told Henrietta heel, and started for home. It wasn't Henrietta's fault that dumb bozo, that's the dog, had scared her. It wasn't her fault that she didn't know how to get down from a tree. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. After leaning on the banister in the hallway and breaking it really wasn't her fault. It had been loose for years. Arthur's father could have sued the landlord if she had gotten hurt. Another thing, which was not Henrietta's fault, was eating a goldfish. She didn't know any better. Arthur had kept his part of the bargain. He had taken Henrietta for walks. He had fed her. Now Papa had told Arthur to take the chicken back where he'd gotten her. It wasn't fair. The picture in the newspaper, of which Arthur was very proud, seemed to have the opposite effect on Papa. Papa was hard to argue with. He was hard to argue with once he made up his mind. Arthur had to take Henrietta back. That was all there was to it. Papa said that an apartment was no place to keep a growing chicken, especially one that weighed 266 pounds. Arthur rang the bell and went up the stairs to Professor Mazzacotti's apartment. He was leading Henrietta. "So it's you," Professor Mazzacotti said. "I told you, no refunds, didn't I?" "I didn't come for a refund," Arthur said. "My father says I can't keep Henrietta. He says I have to give her back. He says you don't have to give back the money. I'm just not supposed to come home until I've gotten rid of her." Arthur was almost crying. "So you don't want to eat her," Professor Mazzacotti said. I can understand that. Number 73 is a very pleasant bird. I never eat chicken myself. In fact, I never eat meat, fish, or fowl. Nothing but birdseed and water do I eat for the past 60 years and more. "Will you take Henrietta back?" Arthur asked. His nose was running and he was beginning to sob. "Yes, my boy, I'll take her back. But you are so sad to think of leaving your nice chicken. Why don't you come in? Maybe I can find you some other pet to take her place." "I don't want another pet," Arthur said. I want them to let me keep Henrietta." He was crying for sure now. "Come in and have a look around anyway," Professor Mazzacotti said. "Maybe you'll see something interesting." The professor opened the door to his apartment and let Arthur and Henrietta inside. Arthur had never seen anything like Professor Mazzacotti's apartment. That's what it looks like. There was a lot of big rooms, all of them full of cages, tanks, crates, and baskets. So many animals were clucking and screeching and hollering and chattering that Arthur couldn't tell one sound from another. It was just one big continuous noise. There was quite a lot of chickens, some bigger than Henrietta. Arthur didn't think any of them were as pretty. There were glass tanks with red and blue lizards, cages with birds of every color, and big fish tanks. "Here's something I am proud of," Professor Mazzacotti said. He pointed to a very large fish tank. Swimming in it were a number of goldfish. large ones, and they were perfectly rectangle. If you don't know, rectangle is like a square, but it's a little bit longer. What are those? Arthur asked. Ah, you're interested in my rectangular goldfish, Professor Manakazi seemed proud. I'll give you a couple to take the place of your chicken, but I must warn you, they lose their corners after a couple of years. I've never seen anything like them, Arthur said. Where do they come from? Where? Here, Professor Manakazi said. I raised them myself. If you promise not to tell anyone, I'll explain how it's done. Arthur promised. Did you know that goldfish will grow according to the size of the tank he is kept in? Professor Mazzacati asked. Arthur had not known that. Oh, yes. The little baby goldfish you buy in the dime store, if you keep it in a bathtub, it will grow very big indeed. Of course, it takes time, but it will grow. If you had a big lake to keep it in and nothing unpleasant happened to it, that little baby goldfish might get to be 5 feet long in 10 or 15 years. However, if you keep that little baby goldfish in a little baby goldfish bowl, it will remain a little baby goldfish all of its life. Arthur was fascinated. He made a mental note to keep some goldfish in the bathtub sometime and see how big they'd get. But how do you get squared off goldfish? He asked. Of course, my secret. I do this. I put the little baby goldfish in a medium-sized tank. All around the tank, I put beautiful oil paintings of the bottom of a lake. The little baby goldfish is very stupid. He doesn't know these are only photographs. Also, when he bumps into the glass walls of the tank, he can't understand that it is glass, so he forgets about it. Fish do not like to think about things they can't understand. So, thinking the tank is as big as a lake, the goldfish begins to grow. He gets so big that his sides are touching the walls of the tank. Soon he grows to fill the corners. To make the top of the fish flat, I turn him over every so often. Presto, a square fish. The only thing I have to watch out for is that the fish will displace all the water in his tank and suffocate. When the fish is nice and square, I put them in a nice big tank with other nice fishes, and he is very happy. But why do you want them to be square? Arthur asked. Why? Why? Because they are easy to stack when they are that shape, you silly boy. Professor Manakazi shouted. With goldfish it doesn't matter, I admit. But think, sardines, tuna fish, herring. If they were all rectangular, how easy it would be to transport them. Just freeze them and stack them in a boxcar. No wasted space. The professor offered Arthur a pair of rectangular goldfish. He offered him a red and blue lizard. He said he was working towards a red, white, and blue lizard. All he had been able to breed so far were red and blue, red and white and blue. Arthur was interested in the square goldfish and the brightly colored lizards, but he didn't want to take any of the animals that Professor Mazzacati offered him. He felt it would be disloyal to Henrietta. Besides, you can love a 266-pound chicken, but how can you love a square goldfish? Arthur even turned down a special experiment of Professor Manakazi's, a bat crossed with a mushroom. Somehow being around the professor's apartment would have interested Arthur ordinarily, just made him feel sad. The professor was being very nice and trying to make up for his having to give up Henrietta, but it didn't help at all. Finally, Arthur said goodbye to the professor, hugged Henrietta, and went out into the cold street. That's it for today. Next is Chapter 5. Love you both. Hope to see you soon.